All right, so I'm going to begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, How to Really Use NPS for Growth, where you'll learn some secrets of the NPS metric. Um, uh, uh, my name is Vishal Puravankara, and I'm the marketing manager for Customer Guru. Okay, so our hosts today are Vivek Jaiswal, Kushal Dev, and David McCann. Vivek's the CEO and co-founder of Customer Guru, and he has vast experience in implementing the NPS metric across a myriad of industries. Kushal Dev is the co-founder of Customer Guru too, and he has worked with NPS a lot, and he has a very intensive experience in the metric. David McCann is a CX consultant, and he helps companies design customer experience systems that work and improve existing systems. As a former banker, he designs customer experience systems based on the financial results they produce. I'm going to let Vivek take over now.
Hey, thank you, Vishal. A big hi to everyone for joining us from across the world. And thank you, Vishal, for that kind introduction. We are going to start with a quick agenda. We will be covering 5 topics today in this webinar. To start with, number 1, a quick refresher on NPS. For the people who are joining us fresh and who've never worked with NPS, I'll quickly cover on what is NPS and how to deal with it. Asking the right question is what my co-founder Kushal will talk about, asking the right question and focusing on the reason. I'll step in back at point number 4, where I'll tell you what to do with the NPS feedback data, and then we'll have Dave talk about how to really use NPS for growth. All right, so let's get started, guys. Quick refresher. What is NPS? Well, NPS is a very simple metric. It is a metric that is used to measure customer loyalty. It starts with asking this one ultimate question that was designed by Mr. Fred Reichel back in 2013. And it goes like this. How likely is it that you would recommend company X? You can put your company name over there. How likely is it that you would recommend us to a friend or colleague? And this is rated on a scale of 0 to 10, where the people who give you a score of 0 to 6 are detractors. People who give you a score of 7 and 8 are passives. And the people who give you a score of 9 or 10 are promoters. And finally, the net promoter score is arrived by subtracting the number of percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters. I'll say that once again, net promoter score is equals percentage promoters minus percentage detractors. It is that simple. So why is NPS better? The first thing is that it is empirically derived. It was after researching thousands and thousands of companies that Mr. Fred Reichel was able to identify that there is this one question that is a good predictor of your customer's behavior. And that was this, that how likely is it that you would recommend? People who said that they would recommend, and especially the promoters, passives, and the detractors categorization of the respondents, it truly reflected the behavior that they would reflect after they have answered the question. Additionally, it is the one metric that correlates to growth. For people who are interested in learning more about how this correlation is arrived at, I would urge you to get a copy of the HBR article, which was the introduction to the NPS, the one number that you need to grow. That is the article. Get it from HBR, and I would urge you to read through that. It is an interesting read. And what it tells you is that NPS essentially gives you a leading indicator of your financial performance. So that means if NPS is going up, your financial performance is going to go up too. And if it is going down, you can be sure that within a few months of lag, your financial performance is going to go down. NPS additionally also establishes accountability for customer experience. Now, think about this. If you ask someone, how likely is it that you would recommend us? The only possibility of that person really being a promoter is if that person has had an amazing customer experience with you. Only if that person is a loyal customer would he ever say that he's going to recommend you, he or she is going to recommend you. That is because recommending someone's product is like putting your reputation online, and that is not going to happen if you or any of your customers have had anything less than an amazing experience. So that is why it really establishes an accountability for customer experience, being a measure of customer experience and customer loyalty. That's what it does. And it is a standardized metric. There are tons of other metrics that people use to measure satisfaction and whatnot, but there is only one metric that really has been standardized across the industries and across the countries. What it does is it tells you that by asking this one question, you are able to segment your customers into promoters, passives, and detractors. And by using the Net Promoter Score formula, which is percentage promoters minus percentage detractors, you're able to arrive at the one number which is standardized, can be used to benchmark across your competitors within the same industry or between different industries as well, to understand what is the loyalty score or loyalty uh, coefficient, if I may say so, across different industries when it comes to the customer relationship. There are a few other starking difference between NPS and other metrics that are used. But there is just one thing that I would really like to point out, that NPS is, being a very small and simple questionnaire, people find it very easy to respond to that. And that is the reason why you would see a lot more responses coming in, and where you are able to get a lot more information. So in addition to being everything else that NPS is, the one thing that I really love about NPS is that in comparison to other metrics, which can be arrived after asking lengthy questionnaires of 25, 30 questions, which also requires specialized analysts to be working on it and to be able to decipher the knowledge that you get out of it. Whereas NPS is very simple. It is just easy to understand, and anyone can take it up. So how do you really use NPS for growth? My very simple, or rather oversimplified and straightforward answer to that is set up NPS as a metric and track it regularly across different touch points and between different segments. But before that, you need to bring in priority in that number. That's where I think my colleague Kushal is going to step in, and he'll tell us how to bring priority in that number.
Thanks, Vivek. That was really insightful. NPS, after all, is the metric that organizations need to track to measure their customer loyalty, because it's the best indicator and it's best correlated to the business outcome. So, as Vivek was saying, you have to bring in the purity of in the number, and for that reason, it becomes very important that you are doing it right. There are a couple of big problems or big errors that companies make when asking the NPS question. Number one is that companies tend to ask the NPS question along with a bunch of other questions, and that actually hides the real value of the question. The other challenge is that it is not asked correctly. It's, the words are wrong, the metric is wrong, something is wrong about the whole structure of the question itself. So let's look at what is the right question. And I would do that with a game. I'll play a game with you right now. And this is with an example on 9gag. Can you spot the sniper in this picture? Did you get him? So that's where the sniper was, if you could not locate. Okay, let's give another try. How about this one? Can you see the sniper on this one? That's where it is, guys. Was it there, or was I kidding? So what the exercise was, just Google of forest images and random circles that were drawn. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of questionnaires out there where you have to dig the NPS question just the same way. This is an example of Delta Airlines, where you see your NPS question hidden in the multitude questions out there. It's the 15th question. According to a study, with every question that you are adding to your questionnaire, there is a 25% drop rate. Can you guess the response rate of this questionnaire, or the response rate of chances of someone going to the 15th question and giving you a feedback score or an NPS score? That's not happening, guys. Take a look at how they have structured it. It's Based on your recent experience with this flight, how likely would you recommend Delta to a friend or colleague? And then there is extremely likely, somewhat likely, not very likely, not at all likely. So this it's totally skewed towards people giving you a positive feedback, and it's definitely not the right NPS the score. It has to be on a scale of 0 to 10.
Kushal, can I ask what would very likely and somewhat likely mean?
That's a good one. Sorry, I don't have an answer to that, but they both look the same to me.
I am very likely to say that I'm going to select somewhat likely.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to people are want people their customers to give them good feedback. That's what comes out of it, right?
Yeah, not very likely. I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. So this is another example, folks, of Acme fireworks, and this is what is this the right way to do it? Where you are asking how was your experience with your fireworks, and then when you ask the recommend question, it is a yes or a no question. That means you are totally ignoring your passives. But believe me, mathematically, passives have an impact on your NPS score. Even if you have zero detractors, the number of passives actually changes the number of promoters, and that's where the NPS score changes. So if you remember, NPS is calculated as percentage promoters minus percentage detractors. That doesn't mean that passives are not counted. That only means that there are three metrics and you're subtracting two, so that automatically the third bundle will have an impact on it. So a yes or a no answer to a recommend question is not right.
Kushal, can I ask you to repeat that once again, because it was a little confusing for me to wrap my head around.
Sure. So Vivek, if you can imagine having zero detractors, what do you think your NPS score is?
100.
Sorry, what if there are 30% from passives there?
Oh, you got me there. Yes.
Right? So it could be if you have zero detractors, you could still have a score of 0 to 100 because there could be 100% passives.
That is true.
Right.
So passives are important.
That
You
they
can't
are,
just ignore them.
definitely not, and not just for the metric, even for taking business decisions, passives cannot be ignored. So that's the right way of doing it, folks. Have the right scale of 0 to 10, bundle your customers into detractors, passives, and promoters, and arrive at your score. This is the first question, and it helps you arrive at it helps you quantify the customer loyalty, which you can probably track over a period of time. As Vivek was saying, you can track it at an organization level, maybe at different department levels. But how do you make it actionable? And that's where our guide to NPS survey design comes into. You can download a purest guide to NPS survey design from this link, bit.ly/NPS-survey. I'll repeat that, it's bit.ly/NPS-survey. It gives you a detailed template on designing an NPS survey and the way to conduct that survey correctly, with a lot of tips and tricks, by the way.
And may I just add that the URL is going to be live right after the webinar. So please don't try it out right now. Give us a few more minutes before the URL goes live right after the webinar.
So now that we have quantified your customer loyalty, how is it that you are going to impact your NPS score, or how is it that you are going to give a positive impact to your customers? And that's where it's very important to ask the why, to get into the reason for that score. And that's why the score is not everything that matters. These are two examples of conducting of your survey, but which one do you think is more actionable? Is it about a rating scale of each department, which doesn't really tell you what is it that, it could be totally biased on a lot of aspects. It could be culture, it could be geography. How about having a very structured way of asking that why, where you tell people what is it, when you ask them what is it that went wrong? It could be leading indications like the one on the sample 2, which is the right one to do it, and it is more, since it is more actionable. Along with that, you can also ask a follow-up verbatim section where you ask your customers to fill in that, to punch in their details or to write their comments. These are some real-world examples of how customers are doing it. Your the Uber way of doing it is where you ask a rating of 5-point scale, and then the follow-up question is what didn't work? Was it the arrival time? Was it the professionalism? Was it the driver? the trip route, the car quality, or was it something else? And that's where you can actually give in your comments as well. That's exactly how group is doing it. However, they are not giving any uh, leads to their customer to select, but you can still fill in the verbatim comments. A very crisp way of capturing feedback where the focus is a lot more on taking action. So what is it that you need to do? You need to ask the right question, but why is it that you should do it? It will help you the right company, shape the right company culture because your team focuses on the why. The score actually is telling you to compare it across the organization, across departments, but it doesn't really tell you what to do, and that's where the why is important. And the idea is to focus on the whys, and the score will take care of itself. So now that you have defined your score and the right methodology of capturing it, what is it that you need to do with all this NPS feedback data? Vivek, what do you have to say about that?
Sure. So we've had a look at what NPS is, how do you design the right NPS question, and how, like, really you just need to focus on um, getting the obsessing on the reasons and not just the ratings as such. Um, so what do you, now that you have started collecting these feedback data, what do you do with all of this in NPS feedback? One of the things that is important to keep in mind is that when you have segregated your customers based on their feedback into three categories, the most important thing to do is how you start communicating with these categories. And that's where I have these very simple first steps to take. First thing, use NPS as a thermometer to measure customer experience and loyalty temperature. It is a very simple metric that can give you the temperature of your customer's experience and the loyalty. Additionally, make it a metric. Don't mix it with too many things. Make NPS as the metric that is tracked, that is monitored day on day, week on week, and month on month, and just follow it like a religion in your organization. It will bear results. It is going to take time, but it will bear results. And design your customer-centric initiatives based on the NPS data. So what this means is when you start receiving feedbacks, there'll be a certain group of customers who would ask you to probably, if you're a product company, they might ask you to remove a few things from your product, or they might ask you to add something that is missing in your product. So these are based on this information. You have to take the decision as to um, what do you do with the product, and that's where you start designing customer-centric initiatives on the based on the NPS data. I'm sorry, there's some mix-up happening over here. Yeah, so next thing is identify the drivers of positive and negative customer experience. Yeah, so what that means is that once you have segregated your promoters and detractors, you have to identify the drivers of what are the positive and what are the drivers of these positive and negative customer experience. Additionally, you can use the NPS data and segment it based on your customer groups. For example, if you are a multinational organization, you should try and compare the NPS score between each geography, and within each geography, you can look at segmentation of your NPS data by cities or by regions within that geography. Additionally, product segments could be something that can be used for segmentation. Sorry, for segmenting your NPS data. Um, Yeah, so these are a few ways, few first steps to use when you are using your NPS data. What's next? It's important to understand the promoters and the detractors. What is it that inherently these promoters, the group of promoters and detractors, as a bunch bring to you on the table? So promoters are happy doing business with you, and they stay longer and do repeat purchases compared to the detractors who buy less, and they will defect very easily at the first opportunity itself. On the other hand, again, promoters recommend your business to their friends and family and colleagues, while the detractors really spread negative word of mouth. And since promoters are so loyal, they are also going to be more forgiving for small slip-ups that might happen at your end. Whereas the detractors, as you can imagine, since they are already disgruntled, they are going to voice a lot of, they are going to raise a lot of hue and cry over even minuscule issues. The promoters similarly complain less, but detractors escalate every issue at every opportunity. What I'm trying to tell you over here is we can make a list of 100 other items that show that promoters are your friends and detractors are your foes. But it is important to consider both these groups and then make decisions as to what you should do with these groups. One of the questions that was asked to us is, how do you deal with promoters and detractors? And handling the promoters and detractors, you have to strategically take different approaches when you're dealing with promoters and detractors. Um, since promoters are happier and they are willing to do more business with you, spending your marketing resources on promoters would generally be a better will generally give you a better ROI, and asking for references and recommendations from your promoters will usually get you more customers as well. For a B2B scenario, what's interesting is to include them in the product development discussions. Since promoters are your clients who are so enthusiastic about you being in this partnership with you, they are going to step in and bring their constructive feedback on the table so that you can improve your product, in turn improving their experience with your product. You One of the things that is really important to do when you're dealing with promoters is to set up express route to recovery for any issues faced by them. Imagine a promoter having to face an issue, although the promoter might be forgiving and uh, would overlook all small slip-ups, but if it repeatedly keeps happening, then I can assure you that the promoter will not take long to convert into a detractor, and that is not a good position to be in. So always set up an express route to recovery. If there is a promoter raising a concern, that is where most of your people should be focused on. On the other hand, what do you do with the detractors? Since detractors are probably craving for better service, or they've had comparatively worse customer experience with you, it is important to really put your service resources onto the detractors, help recover their experience, and do whatever you can to improve the service quality for your detractors. Also, what NPS does is it helps you identify the promoters and detractors, and that is where its value again comes up. Because you are able to identify who are your detractors and who are your promoters, you are able to do these different kind of have these different kind of approaches. It is also at times advised that you fire some of your detractors. It is obviously almost impossible to please all of your customers. So fire some of your detractors. It will give you more time and bandwidth to serve detractors who are still willing to do more business with you, and obviously get more, put more attention to promoters. On B2B, you need to bring their feedback openly into account review meetings. Do not be shy of discussing their feedback openly, and assign your best service agent to provide VIP level customer service to valuable detractors. You can also use NPS as the voice of the customer. Voice of customer has different ways of gaining customer feedback, and not just feedback, but social media voice. There are tons of channels through which you can capture voice of customer, and And I would urge you to download our blueprint on making the most out of voice of customer. Again, this link will be available after the webinar. The link is bit.ly/nps-voc. It's bit.ly/nps-voc. So now, how exactly do you use NPS for growth? We have stretched throughout this webinar talking about what is NPS and everything. This was the section that our friend David was going to step in, but unfortunately we are having some microphone issues with him. So I'm going to carry on with this section. I'm sure I'll probably not be able to do as good a job as David would have, given his experience in retail banking and deriving the ROIs from NPS programs in the financial market. But so his idea is that you must determine the ROI, and when it comes to determining ROI, we are talking about identifying the value of your promoters and identifying the value of your detractors. And if you can, mathematically, it is quite easy to arrive at the difference. So if you were to increase your NPS score by, let's say, 5 points, and that would mean increasing your promoters by whatever percentage, you should be easily able to identify what is the value add that increase in the number of promoters would bring, if you first know what is the value of each of your promoters and each of your detractors. So that is the one thing that you have to do. This approach will provide you with the financial matrix to decide which group experience should be focused, and the work, and then you can identify and direct your investments to the projects which have the highest ROI. Because you have done this extra groundwork of identifying or establishing the value of each of your promoters, you now have an objective way and a financial metric to identify. Just like NPV, you can use NPS as a way to identify the ROI of your projects. And to ensure that your customer experience system is on track, you have to focus on your delivery teams, and those are your sales and services team. These teams are disengaged with, if you have a disengaged customer delivery, disengaged service and experience delivery team, your NPS program, or for that matter, any program would fail. But NPS being a customer-centric metric, it is ultimately based on the experience your frontline employees can deliver to your customers. So you must engage your employees when it comes to your NPS program. So these are the three most critical things when it comes to using NPS for growth. First is that you identify the ROI of the NPS program. Then you redirect your investments to the projects that have the highest ROI. And how do you how do you establish the ROI? By first obviously identifying your promoters and detractors and assigning their value based on their purchase orders, based on their past purchases and average order value simply. And that'll give you the value of the promoters and the detractors. And lastly, but most likely not the least, your employees must be engaged. So in conclusion, remember to start with the right question. Do not bury your NPS question in big survey questionnaires and obsess over the why. Just be fanatical about finding out why are your promoters happy and why are your detractors unhappy. Don't worry about the rating. Ask why in the follow-up question. Set up NPS as a metric and track it regularly across different segments. And in the end, determine the value of promoters and detractors to derive the ROI of every project. With that, we've come to the end of the webinar. And if there are any questions, we can start taking that right now. So there's one question that we received earlier from one of our attendees. That is how to explain the NPS survey to customers that they understand the scoring system. Now, this listener of ours is asking this question from Australia, where the pass mark is 5, and customers, as per this audience, say does not understand the promoter score. Um, Now, there are two ways to looking at it. I understand the cultural bias that is being highlighted over here, but in my view, and honestly, I think that is the answer everywhere. A 10 is a 10. When you say that's 10 out of 10, everyone would understand 10 out of 10. So when you use the original NPS scale of 0 to 10 and you leave it to the customers to understand, and you focus yourself on delivering an exceptional customer experience, on that scale, people are going to be tilted towards giving you a 9 or a 10 if you have really exceeded their expectations and you have really given them a great customer experience. And like I said earlier in the webinar, focusing too much on the rating might actually pose these questions. But if you're focused on the real reason, which is to improve the customer's experience, you will end up getting the promoters and the passives and the detractors as they are per the customer experience that you're delivering. Well, I'm waiting for another question. If there are any more, you can type in your questions on the Q&A section in your Google Hangout. Looks like we don't have any more questions. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here today at the webinar. If you have any follow-up questions, you feel free to mail us. You can mail me on vivek@customerguru.in, or you can mail Kushal also at kushal@customerguru.in. We would be happy to answer any other follow-up questions that you might have. Thank you so much for your time, and this webinar will be available as a recording for you to listen to after the webinar. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure having you all.